So I think that group of songs, which ended up being on the split with Lawrence Arms, was sort of the jumping off point when we kind of like hit that stride, I think.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Shady View Terrace was a screamo/emo band from Sussex County, New Jersey. You may remember them from their split with the Lawrence Arms and from the many episodes of this podcast where I and many guests have brought them up and talked about them. I can't find any write-ups online, especially in the 5 minutes that I spent looking for them, so I'll just try to jump into the interview as fast as possible. Thank you, Mr. Rob, Ruth, Charles, Spencer, Hitt, for getting Mr. Paul's email and giving that to me through text message. You're a scholar and a saint, Mr. Hitt. After a few emails back and forth and Paul being a little nervous of getting on the podcast, I finally persuaded him, got him on the Skype, and this is what we talked about. The split with the Lawrence Arms, his band, the Oi Scouts, getting support back in the day from Ricky Saporta and the Bomb Shelter crew, what bands influenced them, what labels were they talking to, is there a possible reunion show in the works, and a ton more. This week's sponsor is Mint 400 Records. Mint 400 Records is a boutique indie rock record label located in northern New Jersey, with bands across the United States, Canada, and Europe. The label features great Jersey bands of the past few decades, in addition to new indie rock, indie folk, and post-punk bands. Over 350 exciting releases this label has done. You can find Mint 400 Records releases streaming at Spotify, Pandora, Tidal, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Deezer, and more, or at all MP3 outlets worldwide. You can visit www.mint400records.com for links and more info. That's Mint 400 Records. All the other words are letters, but 400 is spelled out in numbers. Hopefully it doesn't confuse you. Here's a clip from their band Ultra Major's song Lost in the Moment. That song's pretty dope. You should go check it out and check out the other bands and buy things from the label. 3 ways to support the podcast. 1, go to patreon.com/thiswasthescene. You can sign up for $1 a month. It's $12 a year. 2, you could donate one time at thiswasthescene.com. There's a purple button at the top. You can click on that and you can Venmo whatever you want. You can PayPal whatever you want. It just helps keep the lights on, as I like to say, since one episode typically takes me 5 to 6 hours to do the interview and then to edit and then to make the teasers and upload all this shit and then do these intros, which I really, really love. 3, you could buy merch on thiswasthescene.com. I cannot guarantee that any of this shit's going to get to you in time because of UPS and FedEx basically being pushed over capacity right now with things being delivered for holidays. So if you're expecting this to get to you by Christmas, I'm not going to guarantee that shit. But it'll be a nice thing to get a little bit after Christmas. So it's like you're extending Christmas if you celebrate Christmas. If you don't celebrate Christmas, then it'll be a nice little present just to have in general. Cool. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia or screamo nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. For some reason, I keep thinking that you live in Canada.
That's impressive, but why is that?
I don't know. I think I'm getting you mixed up with Josh from Bigwig. Not you personally, but for some reason, because I know he lives in Canada, and I don't know why I keep thinking the two of you, like it's crossing paths with where you live. I can't connect the dots on why I'm thinking that, but I thought you were in Canada.
I am not from Canada, but that's actually not the first time.
No, not from, but living there currently.
Yeah, I've actually I was down at the Jersey Shore one time, and you know those crappy like like merch booths with like the like t-shirts and whatnot, like the airbrush t-shirts. Yeah. The dude came up to me, he's like, "You from Canada?" And I was like, No, what's up? And he's like, "Oh, you just have the look." I was like, "Cool, man. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about."
I guess I'm onto something. It's your mission to move to Canada. Are you in Jersey?
I am in sunny Brooklyn, New York.
Okay. Is it? Wait, so do you actually see Rob a lot? Rob Hit?
I do see him from time to time. Yeah, I mean, obviously not lately. I've not seen many people given our current COVID lifestyle, but yeah, I see Rob a bit.
Yeah, because he reached out to me because I've been trying to connect with you for a while, and we had connected on Instagram a while ago.
Possibly.
Yeah, I think I'd asked you like, I was like, come on then, and Rob hit me up. He's like, dude, you gotta get Paul on. I'm like, I've been trying. I think I've been trying. So I'm glad that you finally have said yes to all of my questions about uh, digging up some dirt. I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
yeah. No,
I'm not gonna do that.
I appreciate you reaching out. It's funny. I feel like I've listened to a couple episodes. Ricky and like a couple of the older ones,
Yeah.
and I feel like the band Shady View Terrace has come up a few times, and it's usually like it's pretty hilarious because I feel like your tone generally takes a turn for the worse, and it's like, oh, like those kind of fucking bands showed up, and I'm like, oh damn.
Of like those fucking screamo bands coming in and taking all the crowd away from liking our poppy punk shit.
I feel like yeah, the name of the band has become synonymous with like ruining Mike Dole's fun. So,
Nah. Well, actually, you know where you guys have come up a lot? Over at Brandon Kelly's podcast.
oh yeah,
because
interesting.
because of the split you guys did with the Lawrence
Sure.
Arms, and the guy Tim Crisp who co-hosts it. I think the podcast is over because I think the whole premise was that Brendan was breaking down all of his records like Slapstick, Lawrence Arms, and you guys have come up because Tim, his co-host, is from Jersey, and then they would always talk about the Shady View split with them. And I don't
Okay.
know because the songs they did with you on that split with you guys ended up being on the comp that they or the greatest hits or some shit
Yeah,
record that
yeah,
they
yeah.
did.
Asian Man re-released it as like a B-sides collection.
Yes. So I think that they took care of talking about those songs there, which means that they wouldn't break down the record with you guys. But he told a story about the guy who put out that release, and he was saying that his brother or someone he knows was overseas, and he was wearing a Shady View Terrace or Lawrence, like one of the two shirts. I'm totally murdering the story, but the guy was like, "Oh, hey, I know that band or Lawrence Arms or Shady View Terrace. Do you know that split?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, that's obscure because they were in like Scotland or something." And
Nice.
and the guy goes, "Yeah, I put that out." And
That's
Brendan,
impressive.
if Brendan's like, now I don't know if this guy was bullshitting or not, but just the obscurity of him knowing that makes me believe that he wasn't lying. So
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I I don't find that hard to believe. That release was definitely kicked off by this kid in New Jersey who was starting a label. His name was Paul. He has later become the chicken finger mogul of New York City, which I only recently found out. But
wait, what the fuck does that mean?
well, yeah. So first with the split. So yeah, this dude Paul who grew up. He came up in the same area, with like Ben Jorgensen and the Supporters, and it was sort of that I think North Central Jersey area. Um, we didn't know him really prior to that, but he had just approached us, through people that we knew in the scene and whatnot, uh, mentioning that he wanted to start a label and that he had some capital to do so. Uh, so we got involved with him, in the standard way at that time. He wasn't like an official label; he was really getting it off the ground. And so we at least knew him. We had a chance to meet him, and we knew him like through other people. But to my knowledge, yeah, as far as the Lawrence Arms are concerned, he also just approached them and was like, "Hey, I want to put out a split with you guys in this band from Jersey, and I have money. I'm going to pay for it." So, so I think they were just like, "All right, cool." Uh, but it was an interesting pairing. I think we were not. There weren't a lot of there wasn't a lot of common ground sonically between the two bands, which I think is sometimes
No.
fun with a
Y-
split if the bands are pretty different.
yeah, like
But,
completely different.
but yeah, but we sounded a bit different, and we honestly didn't know those guys at all. We actually met them at the CD release at the Wayne Firehouse.
Yeah. Well, it's like when we started the tour with them, they toured off that CD. So they had that Ghost Stories and then Tour of Chicago. So we went on our last tour with those guys for almost 2 months, and that's where we had like Fallon in the band and everything, and Chris had just like
Totally.
quit. But I remember that show. We showed up there for that like that CD release. Like I can clearly fucking remember. That was a big ass show too.
Yeah, yeah, that was a fun time. I think, yeah, it's funny. There is some of that connective tissue with our bands as well too, right? Because I think after that tour, correct me if I'm wrong. I think Brian Fallon left Lanemeyer and started playing with us
I
after that.
was go. I wrote that down in my notes. I had heard that as well. So he quit. He tried to get Connor from Scratch Kid to play in our band.
Okay.
And Connor was like kind of gonna do it, and then he at the last second he like bailed. So like Brian quitting set me off to be like, I'm fucking done with this shit. And then so we're at a show. I'm not gonna talk about Brian the whole time, but like we're at a show and he's like, hey. So Connor comes along and I'm like, what's happening here? So Brian's like trying to transition him, kind of like it's almost like if a couple was dating and one of the partners was like wanting to get out, so they introduce them to the like so say it's like a guy and a girl, and the girl like wants to get out, so she just like introduces as they're out to this other girl. And it's like,
Sure.
oh, you guys look like you hit it off, and then that girl leaves, and that other girl stays. Like, what the fuck just happened? And the guy thinks the same thing, and then the girl's like, it seems like I'd want to date you, but I don't really want to date you, so I'm gonna leave too. And the guy's like, well, I don't want to fucking date anymore. I'm gonna be single. That's
And
my analogy of that.
Fallon just moonwalks out of the scene.
Yeah, basically, like he just like bounced, but then he went and did play with you guys for a hot minute.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess that's kind of nice for him to try to like create that bridge. But yeah, so we started playing with Brian. He was just a dude that we knew, from the scene. He was in a number of older bands and had booked some shows in Central Jersey. Um, we didn't know a whole lot about him, but yeah, he joined the band. It's funny he mentioned he was sort of like your jumping off point of like the end of Lanemeyer. He was definitely like the last lineup of Shady View Terrace as well.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, towards the end for sure, there was like another quick version that came after him. But yeah,
He's a virus.
it's funny. I can fully remember. He joined our band. We had played a few shows with him, and we were, most of the time, his time in Shady View Terrace was us bringing him up to speed, teaching him the songs so we could play out. And then it got to the point where we were trying to write some new songs, and that was the kind of the turning point when it became pretty clear that it wasn't going to work out, just in terms of like what where his head was. I distinctly remember getting in a car with him to like after practice to go like I don't know get a coffee or something, and he put on some stuff that he had written in his car, and played it for me, and basically was just like telling me like this is where my head is, this is the kind of stuff I'm going to be writing. And I at that point I told him, I was like, no, I get it. I was like, this stuff is pretty good, but it's like definitely not what we're doing. So there was already some tension at the point, and I think it was starting to become clear that he may not work out, and that was kind of like I kind of like graced the like, yeah, cool, like this makes sense. You should not be in this band.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna ask that because when he joined us, we had recorded 2 songs with him. We did a cover of Somebody to Shove, and then he wrote a song called Alarm, and it did not match our sound at all. But we
Right.
were like, well, we started as a band with 3 singers. Maybe we should like do that again. And then it was just very clear that, oh, this is just it doesn't mesh. So I was be like, I wonder if he did that with you guys, but it sounds like he did. Or was he saying like, oh, I want to sing these too, or did he want
Uh,
Billy to sing them?
I don't think that there was. I don't think he was necessarily angling to sing a lot. I think his voice, if he were to do backups, I think also maybe was not like totally where we were musically, and what he went on to do, I think is pretty clear why it may not have worked out. But I think no, it was more just like he had brought some ideas some songs that he had written. Yeah, and we were just like, yeah, I don't know. It just like it didn't look like it was heading in a good direction. So it didn't last too long after that.
Yeah. Well, I wish him well. I hope he did something.
Yeah, maybe he'll figure it out someday.
Maybe he'll catch that break he's been trying to go after all these years. It's almost like two guys who having a conversation about a girl that they both dated and been like, "Oh man, she was like this with me too." Holy shit. So I kind of like I used to structure it. I've broken from it a little bit in the last couple interviews where I'd go back to like what got you started in music, things like that. And I don't like just kind of going back in episodes. I'm like, I kind of want to talk more and live more and like how you got involved in the scene and then like how the band started because I think it might have taken away some time going back to when you're like 6 years old and working up to when you're like 13. Unless it pops up and you're like, oh, this band got me into it. But like, what? Because you are from Sussex County.
Yeah, I was born in Morris County, but then during I don't know, like late elementary school, I moved further out into Sussex. Yeah,
Were you in Vernon or where were you?
I was in a town called Branchville, which was very far. At that point in New Jersey, it may as well be Pennsylvania or upstate New York. You know,
Yeah,
it's out there. It's
yeah.
pretty far out there.
That's like past Wallkill and all that shit, I
Yeah,
think.
it was very close to Walkill. Yeah, it was out in lots of trees. I literally was living in like a log cabin at the time.
Oh wow. I used to hate Sussex County just because they used to kick our ass so much in soccer
Oh, really?
for the traveling team when I was younger playing in the summer. We were in like the traveling team, so we were in Jefferson and we would drive up. I remember playing like Wallkill, Sparta, Vernon, and they'd always just beat the living shit out of us. And I was like, fuck, these guys are so good. Like, why is Sussex County so good? Maybe
I,
because, yeah, I don't
I
know.
yeah, having grown up there at that point in life, I definitely developed a bit of a hatred for Sussex County too. But it was more just, you know, when you're in high school and you're just like out in the middle of fucking nowhere, it's like, oh god, I got to get out of here as soon as possible. But in retrospect, now like it's beautiful out there, but I
Yeah.
never get out that
Yeah.
way.
It's like if you have a choice to go away for the weekend, could be one of those where, oh, I'd want to go there because it's beautiful and it's woods and trees and lakes and all this stuff.
Right,
Where when you're
right.
growing up, you're like, this is so boring. This sucks so bad. It's like Jefferson was not like, I mean, Jefferson was in the middle of the woods, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I
No,
guess, yeah.
I know Jefferson as well. My parents split up when I was like 9 or 10, and my grandparents had like a little like lake house out there. Uh,
When, like a back on?
no, in Jefferson, right over actually where later I came to learn that it's where like Heiner grew up. Like I'm pretty sure I probably like played in the same park as Rob Heiner when I was like a wee lad and like didn't know that until later.
Holy shit, a moose pack? Fuck. Wait, I have
Uh,
to look this up. I used to like basically live at Rob's house growing up. Hold on, I have to look this. If I don't know the name of this, then he's gonna kick my ass.
it was
I think it's
a
moose
lake
pack.
out there. Yeah, I have to look. Timberwood Lake. Have you heard of that?
No.
Or
Uh,
no,
no, that
Timberwood
I
Lake.
know that I've never heard of that, but I know for sure that that is not the lake that he lived on. Longwood Lake.
Longwood Lake. That is it. That's
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah, Moose Pack or something like that. I think it was behind me. Yeah, Longwood Lake is where we used to play all the time when like me and Rob used to rollerblade and grind the rail that he made for his driveway while listening to
Nice.
punk music back then and like hitting this ramp that he had that was about 3 feet tall and we just launch off this thing and I fell on my ass so many times and I was like, I'm not good at this. Uh, how did you guys so talk about like how you got involved in the scene living all the way in East Bumblefuck in Sussex County?
For sure. Yeah. I think there was definitely always like a little bit of like some kind of a scene even out in Sussex in that way. I can remember going to shows in like junior high that were generally it was usually like a pretty mixed bill. There'd be it was the kind of show where there were like a couple punk bands and like one like crazy hardcore band and one like weird metal band. It was just like whoever the fuck they could get together and play at like the VFW hall or whatever. I can remember there was always a lot of that going on, and I think I feel like punk rock was a little bit of like a conduit for me to to play music, which obviously is not is not uncommon, but I feel like I definitely I was into metal first, so I always grew up listening to like more aggressive stuff, and at a point that I started playing drums, it became clear to me that like I could either listen to crazy metal drummers and like work on my double bass chops and be the best drummer that like no one knows because I'm just like sitting in my room. I was like, or I could like play in a band with my friends and like play some punk rock songs and like just get out there and be in the quote unquote scene. So yeah, I can remember going to shows out in Sussex pretty early on just because it was a thing that was available. It was a thing that was out there.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to like Josh from Right Turn Eddie, and they were playing out there. Like they were like playing ska out there in
Right.
like the phone booth. Do you remember the phone booth?
Totally, yeah, yeah. Like
Hmm.
those, it was exactly those kind of shows, like in like whatever Legion halls and stuff were out that way.
That was a bit of a drive, though. I mean, to get from the top left corner of Jersey to like the phone
Yeah,
booth was off 23.
yeah, exactly. I wasn't like a next door to that by any means, but I was certainly closer than any other corner of New Jersey. I think the high school that I went to, Shady View Terrace, it was a band that was sort of drawn out of a couple different high schools. The one that I went to was closer to I think it's in Newton, New Jersey.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. Okay.
yeah, and the other guys went to High Point, which is the same
That is,
school as like the Folly guys, and so there was definitely like it was like a little bit of a mixed bag from like a couple different like micro scenes, from like different high schools.
yeah, actually, I have a map open right now, and 23 goes right through High Point, so I guess that does make sense. You could have. I don't. This is completely obsolete information, but I'm just like, how did you get all the fucking way down there? Because I always keep thinking like 94. Just growing up and without having a license, how the fuck we got around to anywhere was, especially since we were living in the fucking woods, like how we found these places.
Totally.
But I guess if 23 was a straight shot, that made it easier too. Because I mean, were you going to shows getting dropped off by your parents, or were you driving them to them?
For sure, yeah. Definitely before I could drive, I was going to shows. I worked at a restaurant with some people that went to that high school, so I ended up starting to play in bands with kids like from other areas and stuff. Yeah, and it was always just a matter of wherever the show was. Yeah, like getting a ride from the parents or something, just to get around.
Well, what made you actually want to be in a band though? Because I mean, you said you were playing drums back then, but like, if you're playing drums, most likely you're doing it to know that okay, I'm eventually going to play in a band. I'm guessing. Or maybe some people just are like, I just really like playing drums, and then someone hears it and says, "Oh, we need a drummer," and you're like, I guess. Like, were you asked to be in a band without wanting to be, or were you like, or were you like, I want to be in a band and I want to form one? Like, which one was it?
No, yeah, I definitely was intrigued by the notion of like I said, it was like punk rock to me was something that was definitely achievable. I think I probably had a similar musical trajectory at that point in life as many other people. I was listening to like Metallica and like Nirvana and stuff like that. Yeah, it sort of moved pretty quickly into yeah, just had friends of mine that were into more like street punk and yeah, just being friends with them, having after working, my way through the phase of like trying to place like Nirvana covers and stuff like that. It just moved pretty quickly into just playing songs that friends and I that we would write, in my parents' basement. So it was definitely something that I wanted to do. The first band that I was ever in that did anything was more of like a street punk band. We kind of hit a stroke of luck, and we put music out. We released music, and we got picked up by Jake from the Casualties had a label, and he put out our stuff. So the stuff got like distributed early on, and being in junior high and having like a 7-inch out that was like getting all over the world. Wherever those guys would go, they would like pedal the labels, like the distro with them too. So stuff got out there, and it just kind of happened pretty quickly. Just playing punk rock just out in Sussex kind of opened the door to like a number of other things, I guess.
Wait, so the first band you were in got picked up by his label and you guys recorded a 7-inch?
Yeah, we recorded a couple different. We had probably 2 or 3 7-inches, and I think there was like like a collection of them that got released at one point. We used to record at Clear Cut. Do you ever hear about that place?
I know the name. Where was it located?
It was in Bergen County somewhere. It's like some weird industrial park back in like Saddlebrook or something like that.
I don't know who else recorded. I mean, it's like Big Lumini and
Right, right,
whatever Machines studio was, like, and Portrait, obviously.
right.
Those are ones that I always knew, but there was always these little obscure ones too. Like we recorded our first demo in this guy's basement up off of fuck, where was it? It was like it was like south of 23. My God, Barker's probably listening to this and freaking out over the name of the guy. We called him Toothless Harry. The guy would just rip through cigarettes and had like missing teeth and recorded
Nice,
our first
nice.
demo. Yeah, so there's always those little things that popped up around. But were there any of the bands that you know of that put an album out through there, or you were like, oh, yeah, these guys recorded there too?
It was definitely a name. The studio. I can't think of any that come to mind off the top of my head of who recorded there, but it definitely was like somewhat legit. It definitely wasn't just like some random dude. It was pretty legit studio. It was all like to tape. It was all analog and everything. But
I feel like there's definitely some people I've interviewed where they're listening to going, we talked about this for 30 minutes. That's where we recorded. And I'm just like, I can't remember anything from 2 years ago, but 20 years ago, I'm spot on.
nice.
I don't even know who I talked about like 2 episodes ago because that could have been them saying the same fucking thing. So what was the name of that band that you were in? I don't think you said it.
Uh, the name of that band was the Oi Scouts.
Oh my God, the Oi Scouts. Yes. Holy shit. Who else was in that band?
It was this dude Gabe that I went to high school with, and it was a couple other people from that other high school in High Point.
Oh my
Uh,
God. You guys have a strong social media presence here on Facebook.
Dude, it's pretty hilarious. I got I think 2 summers ago, maybe 3 summers ago at this point. I
Whoa.
got flown out. We got flown out to LA to play a reunion show at this festival, and there were like a shit ton of people, and I definitely like signed autographs on like our like old 7-inch covers and shit. Just
Holy
like
shit.
of like all the bands that I took incredibly seriously, probably like from that point on, like that was just like my intro into playing in bands that for whatever reason, one reason or another, like didn't work out. And then yeah, like 20 years later, that's the band that I'm getting like flown around. They paid for our flights out there and like picked us up at the airport, and like it was a very, very bizarre experience. But yeah, that
Wow.
shit's pretty funny.
Was this the one with at Catch One in LA with Resilience, The Voids,
No, no. So there was
Psychotic Scum?
they had like one. I was going to this programming boot camp at the time, a few years back, and I didn't really have. It was this ridiculous like the term boot camp is not lost. It was like 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and there was like no room for like taking a little time off or anything. So it came around. This idea was floated around that the band was being asked to come out and do a reunion, which I couldn't do at that time. And I remember like the one dude was like trying to talk me into it, and he's like, yeah, no, it's like California, they still like love this shit, it's gonna be awesome. And I was just like, man, I'm really not that interested in like flying across the country to play at some like shitty dive bar, for like 10 people. Like at this point, I definitely like just don't have the bandwidth to do anything like that.
Yeah.
But as it turned out, it was like incredible for them. They like sold out a couple shows and did like a record store like after party, and I was like, God damn, that happened. That's so crazy. And so then the second time around, I was free, so I went out to do the second like a trip out there with them. Yeah, it's pretty hilarious that these are songs that we wrote in my mom's basement, and the the show that I played is up on YouTube, and it's just funny to see. Like I came home and like showed my kids. I'm like, look at all these dudes with mohawks. Isn't this fun?
Oh my God. This is what Dad used to look like. He was pretty cool. I remember hearing the Boy Scouts. I think there was like, I think Barker told me about you guys, and something he was like, yeah, there's this. It was ska, right? Yeah.
No, it was definitely like just kind of like fast, like 2 minute street punk.
The street punk, yeah, like you said. Because I remember one of my friends saying that. They're like, dude, there's a band in Sussex County called fucking the Oi Scouts. And I think I was like, that is hilarious and amazing. Like that is a fucking name.
Yeah, I don't know, lightning in a bottle, I guess. I think because the name is ridiculous, and yeah, like I said, because we kind of got picked up and were like under the, the casualties brought us under their wing. We definitely like
Oh,
did stuff.
that
So,
makes sense then. Because you
yeah,
guys
so
basically matched them, like their style, even just
yeah,
visually
for
from the
sure.
band.
I'm
Yeah,
sure we were just trying to write songs that sounded like them.
it's
It was
real.
but yeah, so that was the early intro, and then I think through that band, knowing going to shows in the scene and like playing and like I said, it was like kind of like two different groups at these different high schools. So once that band didn't work out, I don't even know if we broke up. I don't even remember how that ended, but I had known some of the other people who were some of the guys in Shady View Terrace, and they like came with us to like some of the shows we played. Like I can remember playing this like crazy show in Coney Island High with the Casualties and this like sold out
Whoa.
fucking place, like trying to like squeeze through there and like bring in drums and stuff, and it was just like this crazy experience
Yeah.
to be like 15 and playing, in the city at shows like that. But there were a couple kids that were like sort of in the scene, and they would come with us, and they were not like roadies, but they were just like our dudes. And one of those guys was one of the guys that ended up playing guitar in Shady View Terrace. So it was just sort of like a pretty wide net that we had, in those different groups.
Well, why did you? So you don't remember why you left the Boy Scouts or why you guys broke up, but it was right after that that you started Shady View?
I think pretty soon thereafter, yeah, because of the connection I had with all those kids. I think we kind of got into it pretty quick. There were a couple different lineups, different versions of Shady View Terrace before we really kind of got rolling. Yeah, I think we were like kind of finding our way and experimented with like a two singer lineup for a while, and we're just like played a few shows, locally in Sussex.
Kind of like Blood Brothers, because it seems like I don't know. That's the first thing I thought of, was just their style kind of matched the screamo thing.
Yeah. No, not even. I mean, I think when Shady View Terrace started, we were definitely a little bit more on the spectrum of like the pop punk spectrum, I would say, which I think is,
Really?
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think we were all definitely influenced by a number of different things, but I don't know. At the time, we just came together. I don't know. We were. I think we were a product of our environment, so to speak. Like we went to a lot of Jersey shows with bands that I'm sure you've talked a lot about on this podcast. Like going to see like Weston and Digger and Cooter and all those bands, and like yeah, for whatever reason, we just kind of came together, and that's kind of what the output was when we first started. We recorded a demo pretty early on. It was like a cassette tape, which is like phenomenal to think about now, that like how fucking old I am now. We were like selling cassette tapes that we were like recording in our bedroom and stuff. We went to a studio, God, I don't even remember where, but recorded some stuff pretty early on. We would sell it at shows and whatnot, and then there was definitely a point that we were sort of, I think, evolving into more of what the band turned into. I remember playing a show at the Wayne Firehouse, and at that point, all we had was that cassette still. But we were at that time playing some of the newer songs, the stuff that we were, gravitating towards. And this dude came up to me like after the show and was like, "Oh man, I saw you at the Wayne Firehouse and it was fucking awesome. You guys are so good." And then I bought this tape and I was like, "Who the fuck is this band? There's like pop punk songs on here." Like, I was like, "Ah, yeah. We're working on it. We got to get back in the studio." But yeah, so we definitely started off more in that vein, and just eventually, I think just because we were into a mix of different things.
Do you remember? Do you remember the first couple shows that you guys played as that original sound? Do you remember like where they were at or with which bands?
For sure. Yeah, we definitely played at one of like the Legion halls or VFW halls in Sussex, where we would play. At that time, Folly was also kind of getting off the ground. And so it's not kind of similar how they started off as one thing and sort of moved in a little bit of a different direction. So we would play with them, a lot of local bands. Yeah, probably bouncing around in different neighborhoods out there, Sparta and just like different places like that. I can't remember off the top of my head some of the bands we played with then. I think one of the first times that we left our area, like got out of town and played a show and ended up building, some pretty solid friendships and a following, was actually, I'm pretty sure with you guys, maybe with Humble too. We drove out to Binghamton
Yes.
to play, yeah, at that
Yes.
skate park. You remember that?
Yeah, the one that was in the basement, right?
Yeah, that like very that very sketchy, unsafe place.
That cargo elevator I've talked about many times, and
Oh my god, dude! I can remember it being like the dead of winter, and for the heat, they just had these like jet fucking engines that were like shooting out flames in the back just to like heat up this big empty space.
yeah, totally
But
remember that.
I
Was that the
can
iFarm show? Was that the show with, yeah, where
uh
River City High was on it or something like that?
I don't remember the full bill. I just remember it was an interesting point for us because we'd been playing around Sussex and we obviously knew bands like you and Humble and all the other bands that we'd go to see, but we hadn't really gotten out of our area yet and like made the connection with other bands in a meaningful way that we would maybe start playing shows with bands like with anyone that wasn't in our immediate area. So I remember it was funny because we drove out there knowing that we were playing with you guys, but knowing that we didn't really even like know you guys or anything, but we were like both bands from Jersey that were just going to play a show somewhere far away. Yeah, we ended up the Binghamton crew was really good to us. I know
Yeah.
you had Alex Sardi on at one point, but
Yep.
a while back. And those guys, the whole crew that they had up there was just so awesome. They were just so they just kind of embraced us from an early point. At that point, I think we were still playing a bit of more of like the older songs, but yeah, for whatever reason, those kids were really into it, and that was kind of like our home away from home for a little while.
Yeah, like I remember because you guys really stuck out, and I do remember that show. Like, not like 100%, but I always loved like seeing you guys at shows. Like, I always thought we always got along. Just we'd bump into each other, be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And you're just like bullshit, and we're always like
Right.
cool with each other. And then I think at that show, we played a handful of times out in Binghamton, but I'm trying to think of that. I swear it was that iFarm show.
It could be.
Um,
That sounds familiar.
yeah, I know because we played out there with River City High one time and like Saturday Supercade, and we played with Bigwig, and we played there with iFarm. I think some of these shows might be exactly the same bill, but I do remember you guys being out there.
I'm
And,
sure. Yeah.
and it would always be in the dead of winter because I remember it would just be so fucking dark driving out there.
So, yeah. What an interesting place that was. But yeah, good
Yeah.
time.
And the way that Alex talks about it too, he's like, "Oh, it was just this like sad, depressing, shitty ass town that I wanted to get the fuck out of."
Yeah. I mean, I think there were some parallels to that vibe. Maybe a little bit to like where we came from a little bit. That it was just like we were kind of like out in the sticks, but it was a similar thing of just like, fuck this place, we gotta get out of here. So like, I don't know, we definitely like hit it off with that crew. It was a lot of fun.
So when did you guys start like you had the demo, you started writing new songs. When because I'm guessing that you saw a shift in because you guys are pretty popular in North Jersey, and it came like I wouldn't say out of nowhere, but you guys definitely stood out because your sound was I thought was completely different than anything else that was there because it was all we've been playing with was pop punk bands and
Right.
then ska bands and then like a couple like not really I wouldn't say a lot of hardcore bands like a couple times we like once we played with Uprise and I don't really remember that many hardcore bands we played with, but then you guys came in and really I just remember I don't know why it was like Billy would always wear like a black turtleneck and like a choker or something.
I don't know if that's accurate, but
It was just like it was like the first version of the Refused like would roll in with like all black because I was at the front part of the band like they would all dress like that but you just like seemed like this like because the sound was aggressive but you just always were just like this happy guy and I never saw that like aggression come out when you were like playing or anything you just like seemed like you were always having a good time and I'm like he looks like he's too happy to be matching this music right now.
that's funny. No, I definitely was having
You're
a
like,
really
no,
good
man,
time.
I was angry. I was a burning ball of rage. You know nothing.
I saved it for later. I had to work that shit out in therapy. No, yeah, I think I was always. I think in all the bands that I had played in over time, it was always kind of clear to me that there weren't that many drummers out there. It always seemed like a reasonable idea to me to be kind of on point with just being at least aware of all the different genres, and I was definitely influenced by a lot of different music. So whenever I ended up playing in a band, I probably was not the one that was like truly like living the lifestyle and like wearing the clothes, but I was just like just enjoying the music and just having fun. So that's interesting to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think maybe you said someone had said it that you were kind of the one booking the shows or more like the manager. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. I think I always kind of took on that role. It was interesting. I listened to the episode you did with Ricky, and he had mentioned at one point that he largely only got involved with us because of me, because he saw that I was always like busting my ass trying to like make things happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean every band has one of them, right? I mean, it just yeah, I was always really adamant that we had a lot of opportunities, and there was a lot that we could do. There's always like some luck involved with whether or not you get any sort of traction, but yeah, I was always just like grinding and just trying to make the next thing happen. So
Why did you take on that role though? Like, what made you step up and do that?
I think it was probably out of necessity a lot of times. I think that was one of the things that sort of like drove us off the rails a little bit. Is when there's always one person doing those things, it's fine if they're cool with that, but the assumption is that like everyone's going to pitch in it in some capacity, and I think that was always kind of a struggle. I always thought of it as like living out in Sussex and playing these shows and like getting out of town and playing other places and sort of like meeting new people and getting fans or whatever you want to call it. And I was always just like, man, this is like a really strong vehicle for us. We can definitely like, ride this as long as we can. And I don't think, we're also like, we started when we were in high school, right? So like not everyone is just like thinking in those terms. So yeah, I was always just like, just trying to move forward and just try to do the next thing.
But when did you start thinking about in those terms?
When did I start thinking in those terms?
Yeah, like when did you start thinking about, oh, we can take this somewhere?
I don't know if I have an answer to that. I don't think there was like a specific point. Maybe like I said, how we started playing, we would drive, a distance, a couple hours in any direction and play, and there were people coming out to see us. It's something that was started to become more and more obvious. I think the more we got involved with Ricky as well, we sort of became like a bomb shelter band, so to speak. And I know there were some other bands and stuff that were starting to get kind of pissy pants that we would play a lot of Ricky shows.
Pissy pants.
I can definitely remember people being like, oh, like just probably on some like message board chatter about like, why are we playing so many of these shows? How come we don't get a chance?
Mm.
And I think what was lost in translation was not so much that Ricky was playing favorites. He definitely liked our band and was definitely like helping us out quite a bit, but it was kind of at a point when he was sort of dipping his toes into like kind of managing a band too.
Yeah.
So there was the Bomb Shelter Collective where they would book all the shows, which we would play, but he was also getting more and more involved with us and just helping us. Like he helped us get our first van. He was able to put a chunk of money down to help us with that. And
Oh, wow. Shit.
so yeah, just help us like getting on other shows. He obviously had a lot of connections with booking agents and stuff, so that he was helping us out sort of in like a managerial capacity without officially calling it that. He was, I think, kind of checking that out, seeing if that's something that he wanted to do. So I can remember playing. We played a show at the Wayne Firehouse well, I mean, we played there a number of times in both the small room and the big room.
Yeah.
But I think there was probably a point we played a show. It was Boy Sets Fire in I think Thursday in Midtown.
Jesus.
And yeah, it was like it was sort of at this like this pivotal moment for us where people knew us in Sussex, and maybe a couple if we played in the small room at the Wayne Firehouse here and there. I think people were starting to become aware of us. But I distinctly remember that show where I don't think we were even on the bill. He just kind of threw us on like before any of the bands played, just as like a I don't know, like a chance to like kill some time as people were coming in. And if you remember the Wayne Firehouse, you would kind of like come in like the back, and
Yeah.
the stage was on like the opposite end. So playing first ended up being like an incredible experience for us, because it was like as everyone 1,200 people were like pouring into this venue, we were just up there ripping through our set. I think it was that moment where we kind of had like a crew up front where it was like probably like our people from Sussex and whatnot that were like singing the words and stuff. But I just remember like that feeling of that show being like, oh damn, like this is like for real. Like it's definitely like something is definitely going to happen here. And I think
Wow.
part of it too was the sound, like John Hilt. Do you know John Hilt?
Yeah, he there's a story who's God damn it, who told the story? I think it was Matt from Uprise told the story about John. There was a show where people were fucking with his stuff, or he like jumps into the crowd. Oh my God, this is like literally when the last year the story is told, and I'm forgetting it already. But I heard, yeah, he was a great sound guy.
Yeah. He
Yeah,
he was just like, a wizard in a number of ways. And I think for me,
yeah. Ricky
as
talked about it too. That's right.
in particular, it's always when you're playing at like VFW halls and you're like on the floor and there's like there may or may not be like a PA or a monitor or something, and you're just kind of like ripping it and hoping that you can like hear what else is going on in the room, and then to be there on that makeshift stage, but to have like, shouts out to John Hill. It's like the sound is just fucking amazing, and I just remember being up there and being in the big room in the Wayne Firehouse that was like full and people like singing and it sounded awesome, and I think that was the point for me that I was like, this is definitely we definitely got to keep this up because this is incredible.
Did you guys play? So many questions just popped up right there, but one real quick. I always we played our CD release show in Sussex County, which like the biggest thing is when we had our full length come out and we played out there. Do you remember if you guys opened up or played that show?
Yes, I'm pretty certain that. I don't remember where that was, but I think I've seen a flyer
It was like
that.
Vernon. I think it was in Vernon. It was far. It was out there, and
Yeah.
I always because people they're like, "Oh, do you know Thursday?" I said, "Yeah, they're a Jersey band," and I was like, I could swear that they played our CD release show, but I think I was getting them mistaken for you guys.
That's hilarious.
I think,
I,
yeah.
I'm certain we probably played that show. Our CD release for the split with the Lawrence Arms was in the small room at the Wayne Firehouse. I
Yep.
don't know if
Yep.
it wasn't that show because I remember Thursday played that show. I remember I basically asked them. We had met those guys and kind of became friends. I remember at the time I kind of coordinated with Jeff that they were going to play before us. Like we were just going to like swap gear or like borrow gear, and they would play like two or three songs or something, and then we would go up. And I remember thinking like, these are really nice guys. I'm gonna help them out because like, why not? Maybe one day there'll be something. And like, yeah, just like watch their meteoric rise after that point. But uh
There's so many bands like that happen in New Jersey. We're like, these are nice guys. These are good kids, and there's like, it's like I remember that thinking that about like Random Task or like Outline, and now Jackson like fun and playing stadiums, and I'm like, these are really good. These are cute kids just up there playing their little music.
yeah, at some point in life, I found myself like in some way, whatever, like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I was like always like somehow like very close to all those bands, but I was always like not. I was always like one step away from the band that like really took off.
I think a lot of us felt that way.
Yeah.
Always the bridesmaid, never the bride. But so yeah, there was so many people caught break. I mean, they busted their fucking asses. They didn't, they stuck with it. Like, I mean, Fallon, I give my hats off to him. He just never stopped, and
Right.
he just kept developing a sound, and here he is now, like killing it. But
Yeah.
um, I remember actually speaking of that, just the show, your CD release show, because that's when the Lawrence Arms, we met them, I think, in Wilkes Barre to play a show with them, the first show for that tour that we did with them for like almost 2 months. And then we ended up coming back, I think staying at Sean's house in Fairlawn and then playing the Wayne Firehouse show, which was the CD release show for you guys and them, which was
Mhm.
cool. It was a co-release. And I think that was the first show we played there without Chris.
Okay.
So that was the first show for Brian, and there's a tape recording of that. And I remember, and I heard it last year, and it's like awful. And like I took over the singing duties, and I was such a smart ass. Like I got up there because I was so bitter because me and Chris were best friends for a really long time, and but now we've been since we reconciled like 20 something years ago. But I got up on the mic. I was like, "Hey, you guys, you might notice a little something different." I'm like, "Sean's got a new drum set," and it was just such a bird to just be like, "Fuck you" to Chris. And I think a couple people were like, "Oh."
Did Sean do that? But I'm child.
I think he did. I think he did that. But that was that show because it was on the ground and it was always that corner, and there was a couple lights above us, and the whole rest of the room was just dark.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was kind of helpful because if it wasn't a lot of kids there, which was rare, you'd have that line of heads in front of you, and you're like, well, I can't really see behind you, so that kind of helps that this is like a thin room right now. When you guys did that split, what did you have out prior to that? Just the demo tape?
Yeah, we just had the demo tape, and the split was a combination of a couple different trips that we took up to Nada. We did the first demo somewhere that I don't remember, and then everything else we did with John up in Newburgh. Yeah, like I said, we were always pretty driven to just get something done. we had played enough to have a little bit of like cash stashed up, for like a band fund. So we would always try to get merch or just like record if we had like even if it was like 4 or 5 songs, we didn't know what we were going to do with it. We were just like trying to get stuff recorded and just move forward. So the first time we went to Nada, I think was like we had re-recorded some of the stuff from the first demo, and then the second time we went, it was kind of at like a transition point when we were playing a little bit more of like our newer, so just like the newer material that we were writing, which was a bit like more in the direction of what we ended up. And then we also did a third time we recorded there to demo what would have been our album full length or whatever, but we only got 2 songs done before we before we broke up.
Okay, don't go there yet. We'll get to that part. But when I mean, I was listening to the interview that Brendan was doing, and they were talking about the split, and he goes, "Yeah," he goes, I think he said he's like, "I don't think I've ever even heard that side of the split," and he goes, "I know for certain though that our bands did not sound anything alike." He's like, which I think he said, which he was like that, which was kind of cool as well. But it's like just you saying that before. It's kind of funny that I'm interviewing you and you said that, and I heard his interview where they're both like, you're both just like, yeah, there was just really no thread between which connected
Right,
why
right.
this made any sense. But for some reason, I remember when it came out, and I'm like, I don't, I don't see the connection here, but it kind of worked in the same time, and also and that's when they started putting out like their sound. I could like it started to really go in the direction that they ended up becoming, which went into all their records where people really got to know them. Like,
Right.
as you think that the songs that you guys were putting out then was putting you in the direction where you were gonna go?
Yeah, for sure. I think that was we were starting to write some of the newer stuff by then. I think even when we were playing some of like the original stuff that we had written, we like I said, we were also still very much into, I don't know, bands that are like further on the emo side of the spectrum, if I can use that word, like if that's allowed. But like I don't know,
This is a
bands that
safe
come up
space, Paul.
like we definitely were big fans of like Texas is the Reason, Engine Down. We listened to a lot of Promise Ring, stuff like that. So we definitely had a little bit of that in us, but I think we also there were a lot of like screamier bands that we were into. More so the other guys. I'm sure they could rattle off like 50 bands that they were influenced by at that time. But there was this dude that was from our area, this guy Brian Straub, who was a couple of the guys we're close with, and he was a little bit older than us. He had been around. I think he was involved with that like there was like a Snapcase Refuse show at the Wayne Firehouse, like pre Ricky and all that stuff. So he was,
What?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, like way back in the day.
Okay.
Uh,
Jesus Christ.
so he was a dude that had been around, and he was in my mind at least, our conduit to the band You and I, who was
Uh-huh.
a huge influence on us. So coming from some of those other bands, and like we definitely, some of like the grindier San Diego bands, like ridiculous stuff, like the Locust, and just some of the other like offshoot bands from You and I, like Neil Perry and Seisha, and that was definitely like I think Brian was sort of our conduit to that, to those bands at least. So that was sort of like a turning point. I think even when we wrote the poppier stuff, we were always very much into those bands. We just hadn't really like coalesced together as a group and like found our like direction, I don't think.
Well, when you guys like found that sound though, do you remember transforming? So, I mean, I can think back vividly to when we were writing songs in, my band, and that one song was brought to the room where it was like, I got this idea, and then it was, oh man, that would shift the direction, and we'd kind of expand on that. Do you remember
Right.
like the song that you guys wrote that did that
Um,
shift?
I don't know that there was like one particular one that kicked it off, but I think like I said, when we went back to Nada that second time, we had just been writing more of that and like practicing that stuff. And I remember John, we got up there and we just like ripped through a couple of them. And I remember like he was like talking to me like through the booth, like in the headphones, and just being like, "Oh man, this is awesome! You guys definitely took like a little turn here." Like he'd only known like the last time we were up there. Um,
That's cool.
so I think that group of songs, which ended up being on the split with Lawrence Arms, was sort of the jumping off point when we kind of like hit that stride, I think.
Who
Uh,
who wrote the lyrics for you guys?
The lyrics, I think, were probably always written by Billy.
What did he write about? And then did you ever read them and go, wow, these are really good?
um, I think uh, probably a lot of our stuff was in the vein of what you would expect from a band that has like some uh, emo in their DNA. I think it was a lot of about that sort of stuff for relationships. There was another band at that time that I don't think that we were necessarily directly influenced by, but there was another band that was sort of doing this sort of thing where they were like heavier riffs and more aggressive, but it was like about like girls and stuff that band Grade on Victory Records.
Yep. Yeah.
So there was just sort of, I don't know, there were just like bands like that were starting to like open people's interests, where it was like you said, it was like a little bit different. I don't think Shady View Terrace like broke any new ground musically or anything, but I think we just kind of hit at a time when people were becoming more open to that sort of like
Oh
uh,
yeah.
crossover or whatever.
That
But
was exactly at that time. That's like what I've talked about in other interviews where I'm like, yeah, we were playing this poppy stuff and we're trying to advance on that and like Newfound Glory's around Midtown. I'm like, and then this like new sound comes in where it was, you're right, it's taking, because there's like the guitar riffs, that clean guitar with that weird moody sound that goes quiet with their,
right,
and then it's like, but the singer's screaming, and then but then that the whole thing, like the screaming thing came in, and that's when like you're right, like Gray did that, you guys were bringing that into the scene. Like I mean, I know there's so many other bands, but that it just like pop started sprouting up all over the place,
yeah, yeah.
where it was like, oh,
Those are the
okay.
bands that come to mind at the moment anyway. But definitely, I think you and I was the closest to our hearts at that point, and they were doing that before, like they weren't a band that would play at like the Wayne Firehouse with Saves the Day. Like we kind of jumped on that train, and yeah, and we're lucky enough to sort of, yeah, like I said, people were just like more interested at that time, but I think they were sort of definitely directly responsible for some of the stuff that we wrote.
I've heard of those guys a bunch of times. Is that
They were in a number of other bands as well. The dude Tom was in The Assistant. That was came after you and I. There's a dude Casey in the band. I'm not remembering all their names, but
yeah, Casey Bolin, Charles Butera, Chris Bolin, John Marinaria, Justin Hawk. I got Discogs open right now, so I'm cheating.
nice.
Um, yeah, because I know their name has come up a bunch of times. I swear I must have listened to them just because of people saying their names, but I can't. Yeah, I can't be like, oh yeah, that song, and I remember that record. What was it like? What was the inner dynamic like with the band?
Good question.
I know.
I mean, I think I probably touched on it a little bit. Like I said, we started in high school. We got, we built up a little steam. We got to do, uh, you know, some fun stuff. But I think the inner dynamic was probably, yeah, I was definitely busting my ass with a lot of things. And outside of that, I mean, we were all friends from school and whatnot. But the inner dynamic was probably one of, we had enough common ground that we could write music and enjoy that, but I don't know that we were always like the closest. I suppose that's about as neutral as I could put it. I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, if it was a little bit saltier than that, then you don't have to talk about that. I'm not here to, rip that out of you. I mean, I could be honest, like with, I've talked about many times in Lamar, like me and Chris, like we fucking just at the end, like we almost wanted to kill each other. Like we just could not get along, but it was just because like looking back at it, my goal didn't match his. And like we talked about in his, like he didn't like performing, like he got stage fright and he used to like have massive anxiety. And I didn't really pay attention to that until we like talked about it. I was like, man, I'm such an asshole because like we were best friends and I never even like cared about that because I was like, you're getting on that fucking stage and we're playing this fucking show because I want this to go somewhere. And
Right.
like that was just it, and that's what caused this giant riff with that shit. So I think we were all young guys back, or young, people
Totally. I mean,
back then. So
that's the thing,
it's
right? Yeah, we're talking like 20 years ago. We were like
exactly.
teenagers. So it's like, you can only feel too responsible for for like some of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's like to. I mean, I just know from Sean's perspective, he was the one doing the same thing as you. He was booking everything, and we'd show up at shows, and sometimes we'd complain, be like, "What the fuck is this?" He's like, "The hell, man! Like, I'm doing
Yeah,
my best." We're like, "Pfft, there's like no one here. We drove like 2 hours. This is bullshit.
yeah.
We'll do it a short set and get the fuck out of here."
Yeah, I can remember being on. We did a couple tours, and just this was like pre-internet time, right? So it was like having like printed MapQuest directions and like a big atlas in the van and stuff, and just like calling people, like, all right, we'll be in Chicago in like 10 hours, like hopefully everything is still going on. And yeah, I was definitely the one to do that stuff. And I think there was probably like some level of like, if you're not involved with those details, you're probably like, what the fuck, what are we doing again? Like, this is crazy. Like, but it worked for the most part.
You didn't answer my question before though. I said I had asked about the lyrics, and I said, did you ever like pay attention to them, and like what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they were, I definitely read them. I think that they hit home for a lot of people, I think the lyrics are obviously the thing in bands that people can really, like zero in on. So I think that they spoke to some people at that point. I think, I don't know, some of them were probably better than others in terms of our catalog, but yeah, yeah. So to answer your question, yeah, I read them. I thought they were pretty solid for that point in our lives. That was definitely that translated to, like I said about like the lyrics kind of speaking to people the most. I can recall a couple times in that band where people will come up to me and just be like, "Holy shit! Like you have no idea what I don't know if you've ever had this, but like someone would be like, your music has like gotten me through these terrible times, and like really would have been like nothing without it." And like those are probably some of the most rewarding moments in life, to have
Yeah, oh,
somebody
totally.
like open up to you like that. And like I actually had to touch on that later in life in like job interviews and stuff, because like I totally skipped college. I was on these interviews a few years back, and this guy was like asking me like what my deal was. We had gone through like a couple of them already, so we were like pretty far along, and he hadn't asked me about like school or anything, right? And he was like, "Oh, where'd you go to school again?" And I was like, yeah, I didn't." And he was just like, "Wait, what?" Like he's like, "If you don't mind me asking, like what the fuck are you doing then?" Like you were just like hanging out. And I was able to explain to him. I was like, yeah, I was like following a passion. I was playing music. I was traveling. All those things that you learn like out on the road, are all like very much translated to life later. Like it's
Yeah.
all like the sales and marketing 101, and just like the problem solving. Being in like a sweaty van with a bunch of assholes, and like. Uh, so I was like, yeah, I was just out there. I was just like kind of following my passion, and I was like, yeah, and I had people come up to me and tell me that like I had really like changed their lives, and I was like, so yeah, I was like, I don't have a degree to point to, but like I have that, and that is like so meaningful. It's like
Fuck
I,
yeah.
I feel lucky to have like had those experiences and have people, whether it's the lyrics or the music or whatever, really just like spoke to some people, and that is, and the guy was like, oh, cool, I get it.
He's like, sorry though, you need a college degree. Get the fuck out.
There's the door. No,
No, I totally agree. Like, I didn't go to college. I went to a 10-month technical school when I was 24 and learned graphic design, and then I learned everything after that and paid money for sales training and business coaches and
right.
masterminds and all that shit and all the books that I've read. Um, but yeah, no, I felt the same way. Like, because when when we were when we were doing what we were doing, all of our friends were at college, so our college experience was going to hang out at their dorms and stay there for like the
Right,
night to witness what an actual college party was.
right. Totally.
Yeah, that was like, wait, but then we got to do it all over the country in like different colleges. People didn't know. Like, how many tours did you guys go on, and like how long were you, like each of them?
We never did any extensive touring. I mean, we really were only a band for not that long. I don't know exactly
2.5
from
years, maybe?
start to end. It was a few years, three maybe.
Okay.
So we obviously did like a ton of weekends, like extended weekends, East Coast, as much as we could. We went out to the Midwest and back. It was probably the longest tour that we did. And I think it was probably only a couple weeks, but we were able to get out and play, the Fireside Bowl, and like see some interesting things like out in that part of the world. So yeah, we didn't tour a ton, but that was probably the extent of it.
That's pretty good though. I mean, especially the fact that you get to place Fireside. Like
Yeah,
anyone who got to experience that, I always remember
Yeah,
playing
yeah, it's
Fireside.
it's a special place. I was happy to get out there. Yeah, I mean, I think because of the Lawrence Arms, kind of going back to the split and like what you were saying, how like both Brendan and I, who Brendan, by the way, the Arby's thing. Do you know about that?
Oh yeah, the
The nihilist
Nihilist
Arby's. Yeah.
Arby's. Yeah, it's amazing.
I had already followed that Twitter handle, and then I like saw the interview or like the article that came out when it was. I was like, what the fuck? That's Brendan Kelly.
I
um,
I think I tweeted one time or I messaged. I was like, this guy's been busting his ass for 20 years trying to get people to love his band, and he gets success by shitting on Arby's.
yeah,
That's how it goes.
it's magic. It's pure magic. But yeah, I mean, like going out to Chicago or like those guys. We kind of I think people knew us to a degree, because the bands were so different. I definitely I can remember reading reviews online at that point where it was like, oh, I got this split because I love the Lawrence Arms and I don't know who the fuck this other band was, but now they're my favorite band. This shit's awesome. And like, so yeah, there was enough of that. As much as we didn't even really know them, we were like we said, we were very different musically. It definitely helped us, at least in the Midwest and whatnot. Like I think we had like decent turnouts. I think most places where we went, probably in part because of some of that. Like word was around a little bit. So yeah, that was always really fun.
Do you ever listen to your guys' songs? Like, or when's the last time you listened to any of your songs?
Uh, I wouldn't say that I intentionally like seek them out. They may come through on like a cycle of like a rando shuffle or something. I think the two songs that we recorded last, I think I was the most proud of those two. I think we were really hitting our stride, and I think I've heard a lot of people say that like they're so disappointed that was all they got, because it was definitely heading in like a pretty solid direction musically, and just like the production. We had been working with John over the years, and we just kind of grew up with him a little bit. So I probably caught the two newest songs more than anything.
Where are they on the NJPP SoundCloud
Yeah,
page?
yeah, everything's up there. Yeah, like Polito got in touch with me and asked me to like sort out, like, you had like a bunch of different versions of stuff. Like I said, some were like the old cassette, and then we re-recorded some of them, and like and then the two that never officially got released, we just like they just like got out on the internet, because at that point we weren't together anymore. But yeah, it's all up there.
So that's Emblem of Air and Taste.
Yes, those are the last two songs that we did.
Okay. And I think what I got mixed up was that Billy would have the turtleneck, but Chris, he's the one who has the choker on because he's in this picture right here. Yeah, okay. It's a complete stupid fucking the visual that I remember, but I just remember that for some fucking reason.
Hey man, we changed your life too. What can you say?
All right, man. I was like, I need to get a choker because of Chris. What's the song? I just like all this stuff just popped up. So I got the Wikipedia page open for the split, like I said, and there's a song called Fat with two T's. It just stands out to me, and
Yeah.
what the fuck is that about?
Uh,
I don't know. It might be an absolutely nothing, but just that.
Yeah, like nothing
What's the
nothing
story behind
sensical
it?
that I recall. I think that was probably more of the era when we were writing. We were a little bit more goofy, I would say, and writing like poppier songs.
Okay.
That song was probably at that turning point when we were. I think there's like it's a little more aggressive in that song, but I think it kind of stemmed from the earlier stuff. And that name, who the fuck knows? I don't know. Probably just something funny someone said.
I think I'm just thinking about how skinny you guys were. It's like we're never gonna be fat. I don't know.
There was no fitness goals related.
You guys weren't like trying to get to the gym as much as possible. Uh, so So actually, I posted on Instagram the other day. I said, "What should I add or delete from the podcast?" And there's a question that someone was like, someone to ask, but I don't think this fits in right because I want to know more about like the band breaking up and stuff, and I'm gonna ask this afterwards. But I just want to acknowledge to the listeners that I'm reading what you're writing, even though some of them are crap. I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. What like so you guys are right at the end, and then what? How'd you guys break up?
um,
If you want to talk about it.
Yeah, no, like I don't mind. I'm trying to like think back on like what the actual details were. We had gone through a couple different lineups throughout the course of the band. Like I said, we started as just like some high school dudes. So we had two brothers in the band at the time, and they were I think we were part of it, I think, is we were sort of in a state of flux pretty often. The two of those guys ended up leaving.
But Mike and
Uh,
Joe?
that's what's that?
Mike and Joe
Mike and
Krutkowski?
Joe, yeah, Mike and Joe Grukowski.
Okay.
They were really good dudes. We were I was probably closest with those guys. But yeah, like I said, this was like high school time, right? So like once you start and you're like on a trajectory like that, and like your life gets involved, right? And your parents are like not thrilled about you know, going out on tour and playing the fucking Fireside Bowl is like what you're doing with your time. So I think those two guys were. I think Joe ended up going into he went to like the Navy or something, and moved out to the Midwest. And Mike was just sort of like, I don't know, becoming a grown up Mike, and just was like, the band was kind of infringing on his ability to like make solid money and stuff. So those guys left. We got that's when we got Fallon, I think, came in next. We had this dude Mitch that played bass, who was he was like housemates, I think, of Billy in New Brunswick at the time. Is how we got to know him. He was from Long Island, and he was in the band Sons of Abraham, which was like sort of the precursor to, it was like a couple of guys from Glassjaw. I think both the guitar players from Glassjaw. It was their first like
Oh,
hard.
yeah. The yeah, sorry, go on. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, the seminal Jewish hardcore band, the Sons of Abraham. So he came from a different scene. Obviously, he was playing in bands that were like a little bit like tougher than we were at that time. But that sort of lineup was myself, Billy, and Chris, and then Mitch and Brian Fallon. And as we said before, like the Brian Fallon thing didn't stick very long. Brian Straub, who I was telling you about earlier, who was very much like, I think, a part of the band, the integrity of the band from the early days. He ended up playing guitar. He took Fallon's place. I think he had played with us over the years. He had like filled in here and there, and it just made probably more sense for him to join the band. And so he was on the last two songs that we recorded. So I think that lineup was, we were always kind of like shuffling the deck a little bit throughout that. The more that I was trying to push the band to do, and maybe there was probably like the more that I was kind of pushing on people as to like what the band could do, there was probably more friction of like, people just not being totally, bought into the opportunities we had and whatnot. So, it was just like, it was normal stuff. I think we just, we kind of grew apart. We were not close, at that point anymore. Recording those two songs was interesting because that was Brian Straub's first recording with us. So that was like a whole, anytime, you swap out a band member, it's just like that whole dynamic, even if it's one person, it takes time, right? Yeah. So yeah, we just were always kind of doing that. And I think it just kind of ran its course. The label stuff, I think, contributed to it. We had some difficulty with labels and stuff that just sort of like.
Well, talk about that. Like, what were you guys trying to get on labels, or were labels approaching you? Like, what did that look like?
So we first put out that split with that dude Paul, which ended up getting picked up by Asian Man. Paul just, he was trying to start a label as, a kid from Jersey. So I think once the first pressing sold through, the label had pretty much, I think, fallen apart by that point. So Asian Man picked it up, which was a nice like shot in the arm for the distro at least.
Damn.
But yeah, like Asian Man had no interest in us. We just kind of were like attached to the Lawrence Arms songs they wanted to put out. So they repressed it, and once that was through, they pulled the Lawrence Arms stuff for that B-sides thing. And at that point, we were sort of like finding our own way, sort of finding our sound. There were a lot of conversations with a number of labels, none of which ultimately worked out.
Anyone in particular like that, or?
The Victory was definitely sniffing around a little bit. I think after they had gone all in with Thursday, it was like it almost made good sense that there was another band from Jersey that was like in that vein.
Yeah.
I never, I generally handle all that stuff, and I never had any direct conversations with them. But I would hear things from other people, like this one dude that was, I think, in PR at the label that I knew, and it was just like an idea that people were sort of gauging. Trying to think who else.
Sounds like it's almost a blessing in disguise that you guys didn't.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's not something that I was really like interested in for the sake of the band, but I also was at a point too where we were like, that was probably later in our existence, and I was just like, I knew that there was like tension in the band, and I knew like things weren't going well, and that's in my naive mind, I was like, maybe if we just like can thrust ourselves off to that next level, things will level out and things will be okay, which is like clearly like a terrible way to approach anything. So,
Yeah.
I was always okay to like have those conversations with people, but nothing really came of it. I think we talked with Triple Crown quite a bit,
Oh wow. Okay.
which is interesting. Like the Folly guys ended up releasing some stuff with them.
Yeah.
We talked a bit with Fred and like met him in the city and like went out to dinner and stuff. There was the Jamie Josta from Hatebreed had a label that he was not running. He had like someone else running it, and that dude was like reaching out to me at one point. Yeah, I think we just weren't fully ready. Yeah, like I said, I think I was trying to push us to that next level, but I don't think as a unit we were like ready for any of that. So none of it really panned out. But the furthest we got with the label was with Eyeball. We were sort of part of that crew with Thursday. I was pretty close with the Thursday guys, and I spent a lot of time at Alex Eyeball's house for the parties and whatnot. So that was like a very that probably had the most juice was doing something with them. But then, yeah, I don't know. It was a weird time. It was never like clear if we were like on the label, if we were like gonna do something. And then those last two songs that we recorded at Nada were basically like demos of like what we were gonna go back and record like an album for Eyeball. Yeah, that just like didn't work out either. I can remember just like there was a lot of uncertainty. Like there was definitely interest. We definitely talked pretty extensively about it. But even up until the point where we were recording, it was like, hey, we're going to the studio next month. So like, let us know like what the deal is with like who's paying for it or like how that's going to work out. And I was like, yeah. And then it was like a couple weeks later, and it was like, hey, if do we know what's going on with that? And like not really hearing back. And like literally all the way up to the point where like this is when John was still like in his mom's basement when the studio. Yeah.
Yep.
And I remember like we had just finished recording those songs and we were like breaking down, and I was like literally like leaning on John's like mom's washing machine and like calling around and being like, hey, so like we're done now, so I guess I'm gonna go to the ATM and get some money. So, like, we were doing this, just like stuff like that just kind of like breaks you down, and just we didn't really like have like a direction at that point, so that I think that was part of it.
Oh man, wasn't that the time where I know when John started off, he was doing like $50 a song or 100, something crazy, and then he started blowing up, and then
something like that. Yeah, yeah, because we had gone there a few times, so I think we had those kind of
not that time. I think at that time when you guys were recording, that's when he was like really charging.
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, now he's charging. I think he's probably charging way more, which he should. But I mean, I remember like Humble coming back from their demo tapes. So like, yeah, this guy's got this recording studio. It's like $50 a song. I was like, what the fuck? And we're like, because we were always going to Portrait, and then we ended up going to Nada. But yeah, I mean, that's got to be just so fucking heartbreaking or devastating where you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna just go fucking pay for this for hundreds of dollars or whatever, even, whatever it is. I mean, how old were you? How old were you guys at this point?
This was probably 2000, 2001. So, we were just like a year or two out of high school, so not very old, early 20s maybe.
I love that you were saying before with, I think it was which one was it, Joe or Mike, when you're going, yeah, they just wanted to like, they were getting old and wanted to, have a job and money. I'm like, I'm guessing they were like 22.
If that.
If that, like 21, got to move on, got to get that 9 to 5.
We were trying to be very serious, right? And it just like wasn't in the cards for everybody, so which is totally fine,
It's just heartbreaking though. I mean, I just remember because when you're describing that whole scene of Mike and Joe leaving, you get Fallon coming in, and then you got wait, who played bass? Mitch. Mitch, yeah, Mitch, and then Brian Straub after Fallon, I think, because it's funny, Fallon's name isn't even on the Last FM page.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It says the entire history in parentheses. It's not whoever runs the Last FM. But I mean, I know what that feels like especially when the first lineup goes and you're solidified in that, and you're like, all right, and then the new members kind of come in, and you can just feel that difference, especially musically. They might bring more to the table, but you got to make that gel, and then you can kind of start feeling like there's like a little voice that says, this is not going to this is gonna end soon, right? And you're like, no, 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 no. But it just kind of that feeling hovers there that whole time, and it just starts to get bigger and bigger because you
Totally.
know it's gonna fucking end. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I don't have to explain it to you. I'm sure you're familiar with like the the roller coaster ride that is, trying to do this with like as much of your heart intact as possible.
Yeah. I mean, how do you think you guys would have survived, or how do you think you would have done in the early 2000s when everything was changing?
Uh,
Like through like the early to mid 2000s.
how would we have survived
How do you
as a
think,
band? Or just how
yeah,
would we
like as a
fare like in the scene?
yeah, as a band with your sound, dismiss the whatever inner stuff that was going on, like as the sound, your style, do you think that that would have carried you guys? A lot of bands struggled to keep that alive from what they
Right,
had
right,
because they were just dismissed going into the 2000s through, and then some bands stuck it out and they're still around, but they were like, that was hell. But
right.
like, when everything changed and also an alternate alt press became like the fucking tiger beat of punk rock, and like everything became like a crazy fashion show and shit. How do you think you guys would have handled through that up to like, let's say 2005?
It's interesting. I mean, I think the what I think probably most about the band is that it sort of ended on a disappointing note and sort of like unfinished business kind of thing, because I felt like we were definitely riding a little bit of a wave there. So it'd be curious to know like where that would have gone if we had like been able to stick it out. I think even after us, the scene, so to speak, like changed again, and maybe in a way that I don't think that we were super interested in. But we actually talking about labels. We talked with Richard and Stephanie for a while early on too, which was like before like those bands had sort of like blown up. And I think they had a number of bands sort of later, like sort of like the post Thursday wave, which were, yeah, it was more just about the look and the everything about it, which was like the internet was like more of a thing at that point too.
Yeah.
I definitely reflect back on that time and think about like it's like the old man speech, but it's like things definitely got a lot easier, I think, from that point to get on bigger shows, to like get tons of merch and do bigger things. So I think I don't know, it would have been nice to like ride a little bit of that wave, but I don't know that we really would have made it, because I don't think we were like quite in that same space of like cool haircuts and stuff. So yeah, I don't know.
Do you think you would have wanted to?
I mean, sure. I definitely was always like striving to do like the most that we could and just like get out and just like tour and meet people. Obviously, like big shows are fun, as are small shows. But yeah, we were, yeah, I think we obviously all would have been into it. But yeah, it just never really got that far.
So I was gonna ask about how soon after the band split did you stop kind of going to shows? And I am gonna have you answer that, but I kind of like thought about that myself, where it seemed that there was like a hard stop for a lot of people, even without
Right.
bands splitting up, but just people kind of going to shows and they're like, this sucks, and they would stop. Especially like in talking to Pelak and talking to Dave from Taxi Cab, like they were trying to put these shows on in Hamilton Street and all that, and they're like, it just started to just change where it's almost like you're holding on to something that is clearly dead, but you're trying
Right.
to make it work because you're like, oh, I'm so reminiscent to 3, 4 years ago, and you're like, yeah, that's over. So a lot of people I think just kind of hung on to it and like held like kind of did like a kung fu grip, and or and then to drag them
Sure.
along.
Sure.
Like where was you? How did you end? Like how did you end going
I mean, I
into
think
shows?
it goes without saying that that was a pretty special time. I think for all of us, and I think for the scene at large. I guess I would say. So it's easy to reminisce on that stuff and think and want to like hold on to that. But I didn't really like find like I think of that more now looking back on it, like how great of a time that was. But I didn't have that thing where I just kind of like was on pause for a while. I definitely like hopped over to some other bands like pretty immediately.
Oh yeah, that was gonna ask that too.
Not necessarily like in the same genre, so it kind of gave me the luxury to just like keep playing out and keep doing some stuff. So Yeah, I didn't quite have what you're describing, but I totally understand that sentiment.
Were you in Jersey the whole time? Like when the band broke up, were you still living in Jersey or did you move to Brooklyn? Like,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I was in New Brunswick at the time. I think pretty soon thereafter, I started playing drums for the Banner, which is like a hardcore band from Jersey.
Okay.
I kind of had my roots with John up at Nada, so I had some time and booked booked some stuff to help those guys. I played on their first EP and played a bunch of shows with them, but so that was kind of scratching the itch of like continuing doing that stuff. But I think that it was like a little bit more like tough guy than I was like ultimately interested in like sticking through. But it was just like cool to just like have friends that I could like play in more bands. And yeah, I did a couple of the bands after that were sort of like you know offshoots of like this dude from that band, this dude from this band that were did some recordings here and there, but ultimately didn't play out as much. But then probably a few bands later, I sort of went all in and tried to do it seriously again with a band called Monument, which was we recorded at the same place that Gaslight did their first record. And it was sort of like riding the coattails of some of the My Chemical Romance stuff that like connections I had with those guys. We were recording at a studio that was their manager's place that they were sort of like farming bands out to like move up to Warner Brothers. Yeah, we released it on the same label as Gaslight, but that too kind of fell apart and like didn't really go anywhere after doing a little touring. But similar sort of story, I guess, as Shady View Terrace. But yeah, so I kept busy and I was definitely doing a bunch of other things. But yeah, so I didn't fully like work my way out of it for probably another few years.
Okay. That's it. Yeah. But you stuck with it by being in bands though. Like you didn't quit and just like not playing bands and kept going to shows every
Yeah,
weekend.
exactly.
Yeah. I don't know if I would have. I think there's definitely something about when the band breaks up, there's a bit of a I don't know how I could say this properly. Like it's almost like an identity change. Like your identity gets lost a little bit because when you're showing
Sure.
up prior to that, you're like, well, if I wasn't playing a show, but I still have that band, that's just kind of cool, and I know we're gonna play again. I think it would have been kind of sad to show up. I mean, I like moved to LA right away, and I didn't stay around in Jersey, so I missed all that. And but I think to go to shows and just know that like you weren't gonna play again, I don't think I could have handled that well because I've been like, oh man, that sucks.
Yeah, if you think of it that way, for sure. Yeah, and maybe me staying active and doing other stuff was just my knee jerk reaction to like not fall into that place, right? I
Yeah.
just kept out there and kept doing stuff just so I could keep recording, keep touring and stuff, which is what I wanted to do. But yeah, it definitely it's all encompassing. Definitely trying to do something like that, especially that point in life when you're still kind of like forming your own brains and whatnot. So it definitely can
Mm.
be pretty tough.
Yeah. Did you guys ever have talks of a reunion show?
Not officially, not with me anyway. Someone told me the other day that there was like some chatter on like somewhere on the internet, YouTube or comments or something that was like, someone was like, yeah, the band is gonna do some stuff in like late 2020 or 20. I forget exactly what it was, and I was like, oh shit, I guess I'm not I didn't get the invite, so I don't know if they have any plans on doing anything, but
Oh wow.
there's always been talk for years, right? People are always like, oh my god, if you guys fucking played, get a show at the Wayne Firehouse and like the whole state's gonna come,
Oh
like
man.
a lot of people have definitely tried to talk me into it, but I haven't really talked to those guys in probably 20 years. Like I don't think there's anything like that in the works. I don't know.
I was thinking about we did a couple reunion shows. We did three of them in 2005, then we did 2009 or 2008, and then 2010 or something like that. I forgot what the fuck it was. And it was almost like you graduated from high school and you go to your reunion like 5 years later, and you're like, there's really no change. This isn't like there's nothing really exciting about this. And they were okay and they were fun and stuff, but the one we did 2 years ago with Humble, that was so much fucking fun. Um, I can imagine, and after we did it, I was like, I'm good. I don't want to do anymore. But since this whole COVID thing, and I was like, prior to this, I was like, if the Wayne Firehouse would do a show, I would be there.
Totally. I feel like so many people were it was such a big part of all of our lives.
Yeah,
I've heard
man.
people talk about like someone's got to make like a documentary about the Wayne Firehouse and like that era because it just was so crucial for so many kids at that time.
Well, the last scene doc, that's happening right now.
Is it? It's actually in the works.
Yeah, it's been in the works for last couple of years. I think he's been like doing all this footage and like interviews and stuff. It's gonna be about that whole era and stuff. It's pretty dope.
Nice. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think back in just in like just the friendships I made, even as like other drummers of that time in life. It's like really awesome to grow up and be inspired by different drummers. But at that point in life, just to have like I felt like I had like a little crew there for a while. It was like, you know, I always had like a pretty close bond with Tucker from Thursday, and like when I lived in New Brunswick, and like Benny, from Gaslighter, he was doing Low End Theory at the time, and
Yeah.
like yeah, just like Rob Hitt, like you mentioned before, and just like so many just like solid dudes. Joe Padula, who was Steve from Thursday's brother, and just like yeah, like I still talk to these guys like pretty regularly, and it's just like we were just all like-minded dudes playing drums in bands that it's just like it was like really great to just like yeah form those friendships and still be in touch with those guys.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, that's like the best part about this whole thing is that there's a lighter vibe and there's no like pressure for anything, especially if it's so far removed, like yeah, so far removed from back then, where just those relationships that you still have, like that's like, it sounds lame, but it's like that's the best. That's like the best part is that there's no pressure to do anything with it, but you just be friends and go like get drinks or not get drinks and just like bullshit here and there, you know?
Totally.
All right, just a couple more questions and I'm gonna let you go. Is that cool? Like I'll
Yeah.
make it fast. So this is one I've never asked and someone wrote it the other day. Top three songs of the era from your guest.
Of the era.
It's top three songs of the era from your guest. So I said, what should I add or delete from the podcast? Top three songs from the era. Oh, maybe they're saying I should have. I thought that said like, what were your top three songs from that era? I think that's
Uh,
how I'm gonna say it.
Interesting. That is a tough question. I don't think I can answer it on the spot.
I know. Actually, I said that I was like, that's kind of like a big. That's a pretty in-depth question. I don't know if
I
they
would
meant from like the local
be
scene.
like, oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna skip that one. Sorry there. Sorry, sorry, Tim. Maybe hey, message me and I'll ask it better next time. All right, cool, man. Well, I'm gonna let you go. I'm really happy that you finally said yes to doing this. I've been wanting to talk to you for a very long fucking time, so I'm very excited about this.
I appreciate it. It's definitely been a minute since I've
Yeah,
seen
man.
you, or almost anyone from that era, aside from the people that I'm still in touch with. But yeah, I appreciate it. Like I said, it was a really crucial time in life, so it's fun to reflect on it.
Yeah, dude. Actually, and real quick, I think the last time I did see you was at the Ramapo College show with us, you guys, the Strider, and somebody else. I don't know if
Was
you
that
remember the
that
show.
dashboard confessional played when it was like there were like
No.
20 people there? Or that was something else.
I don't think, no, I don't think, I know Polito probably has the flyer for this, but yeah, it was us, because I remember the Strider playing, it was at Ramapo, but I remember you guys went on after us. And I just remember it because it was like a stage. I don't know. It's all vivid, but I'll have to look that flyer up. But I think that's the last time you and I like ran into each other and we're like, hey, what's up, man? I haven't seen you in forever. Which now
I'm
it's
glad
like
you remember that. I did not I did not remember that one, but yeah, that's awesome.
I'll have to double check that one. All right, man. Last two questions. One, what would you like to plug? And it can either be for yourself or it could be for a friend who's doing something.
Oi. Yeah, I don't think I have anything pluggable at the moment. I think at this point, uh, with COVID life, my days are pretty much just like staring at my computer screen and working and picking up my kids from school, which I have to do in like 2 minutes.
Oh shit. Okay. All right. You want to plug the Brooklyn school systems? All right.
I,
All
I
right.
I will plug being not ill at this moment.
That's definitely a positive one. All right, last question. What seed ethics do you hold on to this day?
Ooh, good one. Um, yeah, it's probably a combination of stuff that we've talked about throughout this. I mean, it's a lot of like um, just being out there early, being out on tour and just doing the stuff in that sort of I don't know DIY way. You learn so much, and I think that all those things that I talked about when you're like it's all the things that you are all the keywords that you put on your resume later in life, right? Like I'm sure with like having your own business with like all like the marketing and stuff that you sort of like just sort of like acquire those skills early on when you were doing that stuff, just trying to like
Figure
get
it
your
out.
shit out there.
Yeah.
There's definitely, I think I definitely approach everything still with that spirit. Yeah, I think just maybe a good way to sum it up. Yeah, it's just like the do it yourself, the DIY ethic. It just doesn't, it's never lost on me. I mean, I think that's always how I've approached things. So that was probably where that stuff was battle hardened back then. So yeah, I definitely take that with me.